So again, welcome to this is the secondary behavior community of practice, and this is our session number 2. And I'm sure if you've seen the title at all, or if you looked at that in their email, if you've ever had any students that have engaged in any kind of power struggles, defiance, lack of motivation, or non-compliance, this is going to be the session for you. And so I think probably if you've been an educator at all, in any capacity, you've probably experienced this a time or two. So welcome. And we're so grateful that Christine is here. I don't want to take up too much time. I did put her bio in your email so that you can read that, and we won't take time to do that today. But just suffice it to say, she's amazing and you're going to love her. And so Christine, if you'll go ahead and advance that slide. I do want to point out, I have put it in the chat and I will redo that right now for everyone. There are 2 Jamboards like we had last time, and I just kept the same Jamboard. If your last name starts with A through K, you're going to go onto that Jamboard, or L through Z, whatever respective Jamboard fits your last name. If you'll go to that and go ahead and try that, open it up. And then when you open it up, you're going to see at the top of that page, right above the board, it looks like a little TV screen. And then there's 2 arrows, one on the left and one on the right. If you'll click the one on the right, it will take you to page 2. And so that's the one that we will be working out of today for today's session. And so any kind of general comments or questions, again, they do need to be general, because it's just really hard to ask, for Christine to answer specific questions when we're on a statewide training. That could definitely be something followed up in an email or at another time. And so if you'll please put some things on there. I know that Christine loves to get questions. And if we can keep it to this week's, we will have a Jamboard that will continue out for every single session. And as I said, we are recording. And so any kind of resources that are shared today, the slides and the recording will be sent to you in a follow-up email if you registered for today's session. And then I've had some questions about PTSB. You will be receiving a certificate of attendance for today for each session that you attend. And then you can just gather those together and submit those to PTSB with that link. And I will have all of that information in an email for you as well. So anyway, don't worry about that part. And if you've attended any the secondary and the primary sessions, you will definitely have enough to submit a half credit to PTSB. And if not, you can combine all of your hours and put that in there. And this is just those Jamboards, so we can go ahead and move on from that. All right, well, it is now time for me to turn it over to Christine so that she can, for the reason why you're all here today. So Christine, welcome, and thank you again so much for being here with us to go over this important work.
Sure, Dina, thank you. I love working with you guys, and I am actually in Riverton this week, so getting to work with some of the schools out here, and that's been fun. So thanks for being here, and thanks for being ready and willing to learn, especially after a long day on a Thursday. I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready for Friday. Anyway, the topic this week is really trying to target why students engage in defiance, noncompliance, arguing behavior and things like that, and how to prevent those behaviors from happening. So we're also going to talk about precision commands and requests. That's a really great tool to tuck into your tool belt when it's implemented according to the science. And you guys know I'm all about how to do things appropriately and with fidelity, rather than just saying, yeah, I'm giving precision commands, but it may not be according to how the science has outlined those to take place so that they actually function and work. And then we're going to talk about how to understand and implement planned and agreed upon consequences. And I can't wait to get to that part, because that really does change behavior when students know what the expectations are and what they will get access to if they abide by those set of expectations, or if they don't. So We're going to start with objective 1. Why do students engage in these type of behaviors? There are reasons. Behavior is science. And that's one thing I love about my field, is that I can look at behavior, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, far from, but I can look at behavior and I can hypothesize why a behavior is occurring. And that allows me to put measures in place or interventions in place to help that behavior to decrease or weaken or not happen at all. And it's very fun to be able to kind of tweak interventions, antecedent interventions, and consequence interventions to help students ultimately be more successful and happy at school, and for teachers to not quit because they have tools in their toolbox that are effective, and they can go home at the end of the day and not feel so drained maybe after a day at work. So what is defiance? So defiance is all the things written here. They're oppositional, they're uncooperative, they're rebellious. And when you teach in middle and high school settings, we have a lot of kids that are experimenting with who they are and what they believe, and might engage in some behaviors that maybe even seem a little bit unnatural for them to engage in sometimes. Well, did you know that it is normal development for a 2-year-old? We always say the terrible twos. Well, now you can say the terrible teens, right? It is developmentally appropriate for teenagers to experience these kind of defiant behaviors, generally in their early teen years. And so now that you know that there's actually a medical reason, and it's just part of their actual physiological development, maybe that can help you understand a little bit more how to address those issues, and maybe have a little bit more compassion and understanding as to why students may be testing your patience. So the power struggle, when we have kids that are engaging in arguing behavior, well, it takes 2 people to have that power struggle. It takes 2 people to argue. And generally the student is exhibiting noncompliance, and the teacher ends up trying to force them to comply. I've been in many classrooms where the teacher will say, you need to sit down right now, and the student won't, and the teacher will count back from 10 and have that, trying to force that student to comply. And when they don't, you can tell they're getting exasperated, they're getting frustrated. And so what do they have to do? And they generally end up doing 3 or 4 different strategies, and then saying, if you don't sit down, I'm going to call the principal to come in here. Or I'm going to call your mom or your grandmother, right? And so how are we working with our kids so that they will listen to us and engage with us without having to argue or engage in power struggle, which ultimately results in worse behavior? And we're going to talk about this throughout this presentation. When we treat students with things like threats or punishment, they generally will act out in greater frequency of misbehavior. And so we'll talk about the punishment cycle down a little bit in this presentation, but really knowing how to implement these things appropriately will help you to work smarter, not harder. Generally, when there's a conflict, it's more of a feeling of control or a feeling of significance for both parties, right? The student may be trying to assert their power, like, I don't have to do what you tell me to do. And that's pretty normal sometimes, especially if we ask it in a certain way or demand it in a certain way or give a threat. But it's also kind of a power or a feeling of power for the teacher. This is my classroom and you're going to do what I say, or I'm going to make you do what I say. And so I want you to kind of put yourself in the position, if you can today, of being one of your students and seeing you reprimand or give direction to one yourself, and what you would reflect yourself as looking like or feeling about you when you're giving that direction to yourself as a student. Kids don't engage in the power struggle to disrespect you or frustrate you. It's part of, like I mentioned earlier, their developmental growth, but it also is their learning and expanding and learning who they are and stretching their wings a little bit. And so we can certainly do things in a better way to help support better student behavior. So we have kids that are on task, engaging in appropriate behaviors, and doing all the things we need them to do during the school day. So behavior is communication. Any behavior you have communicates something. If you go to the grocery store, that might communicate to me that you're hungry or you need something for dinner or you don't have deodorant, right? Whatever those behaviors are communicating something to me. When you get in your car and start the engine, that is saying that you're going somewhere. And when you show up at work and you sit down behind your desk, that's showing me that you think work is important, and you're telling me that you like to be at work or you need a paycheck, right? Everything you do during the day is either reinforced or punished. Reinforcement means that behavior is going to continue, and punishment means that behavior is not going to last very long. What happens at New Year's? We make these New Year's resolutions that we're going to eat nutritiously or we're going to exercise every day of the week. And what happens is, if we start engaging in those behaviors and we feel good and we're happy and we have those endorphins going and we see some results, we will continue with that behavior because it's being reinforced by our feeling better, maybe our feeling that is, we sleep better or we start losing weight, right? That reinforces that behavior. If you don't have those consequences from engaging in that behavior of eating healthy or going to the gym, and you're not seeing that you feel better, you're not sleeping better, and you're not losing weight, those behaviors tend to kind of fall off to the wayside, right? We don't engage in those behaviors if there's no consequences that are reinforcing to us. So when we think about communication, what I want you guys to think about is that one student that you just can't get a hold of. What is wrong with this student? Why are they doing this to me? I can't get through the day. You may even be saying, this is my last year as a teacher. I've heard that already, and it's January. But teaching is a really hard job, and dealing with student behaviors is frustrating and draining for a lot of us, right? So ask yourself, why is the student engaging this behavior? What are they trying to get, or what are they trying to get out of? And then what other factors could be affecting this student? So really looking at, what is this child trying to communicate to me? And yes, even if they're 18 years old and they have a beard, they're still a child and they're communicating something to you. And we can kind of spend a few minutes to reflect and be thoughtful as to what this child needs or wants or needs to get out of for whatever reason, and help them so that they can be successful at school. We have lots of kids that come to school and they haven't slept. Maybe they stay up all night playing video games. They don't eat properly. Sometimes they don't eat at all. They have school lunch and that might be the only meal that they get. Our kids have a lot of struggles, a lot of things that they're dealing with. And you think about even some of the kids you know who have experienced some pretty adverse childhood trauma, and the inability that they have a hard time making decisions. They have a hard time maybe following the rules or remembering things. And if you've ever experienced as an adult anything traumatic, maybe even a divorce or a death in your family, you don't function, your brain does not function the same as it did if you did not have that experience. And so when we're working with our children, sometimes you may not even know what they're going through at home. And sometimes you may, but they're not going to all respond to you and respond to completing work and doing all the things that we have to do during the school day, the same as some of the other kids. Right after we came back from the COVID pandemic, I had a high school student that I was working with, and he was all of the things that this presentation is titled. He was defiant, he was off task, he was rebellious, he was non-compliant. And I found out that his single mother, who worked 2 jobs, could not support him and his 2 little sisters. And so she asked him to get a job at McDonald's. And so he was coming to school, and then he was going to do a shift at McDonald's that he didn't finish until like 1 or 2 in the morning. He would walk all the way home and then have to come to school the next day. His mind was not on passing his math class. His mind was on probably being tired and trying to help his family eat, literally. And so when we know more about our students, maybe we can be a little bit more empathetic as to what some of those struggles are, and that sometimes school might not be the most important thing for them. How do we love them and help them and support them so that they can be successful in our buildings? Most of the time I see negative student behavior, and I know I'm a behavior analyst, but I'm also a teacher. it's masking some kind of an academic struggle. This happens all the time. And I'll have teachers say to me, well, I've seen them do it. They've done it before. And maybe the child can struggle through a math problem and take 15 minutes and come to the right answer, the correct answer. But that's not saying that they really didn't struggle to get there. And so what are we asking our students to do? If they have special education services, we might refer to that individualized education plan or their IEP and see what are the present levels for this student. Oh, they're in 7th grade and they read on a 2nd grade level. Well, that's pretty significant. What accommodations do they need, or what help are they receiving? What can you do as a teacher to make what you're asking them to do appropriate for the level that they're at? If you have a student that isn't able to read and they're in 7th grade, you probably need to look at Child Find and see if that student requires some assessments and some referrals to, special education services. Some of our kids don't know how to ask for help. Some of our kids are really not successful in the social realm at school. They may have different behaviors than kids that are. A lot of our kids, it seems like more and more every year, they're just not sure how to self-regulate their emotions. They're not sure how to have a productive conversation. They lack problem-solving skills. These are things that we're seeing more and more of year after year, and we have to be able to address these things. And yes, if you're a math teacher, you might need to help kids not only problem solve skills in the math curriculum, but also in the hallway, and learn how to self-regulate their emotions and have conversations. That's part of helping them access their life, not just math. And so thinking a little bit broader to what's really important and meaningful for our kids, the whole child, not just your math class. And I'm not saying math is not important. My son-in-law is a math teacher in middle school. He would hurt me if he heard me say math was not important. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are a lot of other things that we can be helping students to learn, regardless of what subject we teach. A lot of our kids engage in acting out behavior to get out of work. A lot of our kids that are class clowns, or they'll start arguing with the teacher, or starting to, act up in getting peers off task and off the lesson. And they're really great at getting kicked out of class, right? Well, they get out of the work. The teacher may send it home or may say, hey, this is still due, and the student may never turn it in. There's no consequence for their behavior, for one thing, but also they've learned those skills of acting up and getting kicked out so that they don't have to stay in the class and do the expectation. Some kids like to see the teacher squirm a little bit and lose control and get upset. Others are doing things to avoid bullying or targeting by peers. And some kids just have a really long history of getting what they want or getting out of what they don't want by engaging in certain behaviors. So I know there's 7 here, and I'm not usually an odd number kind of person, but I was trying to think of all of the things that are best practices. And so the most important things that we can do to really make a difference and move that needle are having a good relationship with the students, all of them. The kids that need you are the kids that are harder. Our tier 1, or not tier 1, our kids that are really great, turn all their assignments in on time, and they get really good grades. That's really, really reinforcing to us as a teacher. They might have good social skills. They might have good conversation skills. We enjoy seeing them in the hall, and that's wonderful. I'm not saying that those kids don't need you and need a good relationship with you. They do, but that's the easy part, right? Those are the easy kids to have a relationship with. The kids who also need you just as much or more is the kid that when you say, hey, how are you today? And they may grunt or roll their eyeballs at you, right? That child needs you just as much, if not more, than the child that is easy to have a relationship with. And so really focusing on how can you reach out to all of the students that you teach and know a little bit about them and help them want to come to class and engage in your instruction. Helping students create relationships with one another is really important. I wrote some grants for some gang prevention in the Salt Lake City, some of the Salt Lake City schools. And one of the things that I noticed on some of the forms that were coming in from students who had answered some questions on some of these feedback forms were things like, if I were gone for 2 weeks, the teacher wouldn't even know I was gone. If I were sick or if I passed away, no one would even know. And I thought, I was shocked at how many kids felt that way, just very disconnected from not only their teachers, but their peers. And that's sad. And we can do better as adults, as teachers, to create environments that are inclusive and safe and loving for everybody. Focusing on antecedent strategies or prevention, this includes academic supports. And so what we're asking kids to do, if they're non-compliant or they're not participating, what can we do or what can we give them so that they will? Do they need some differentiation as far as what we're asking them to do in a project or a paper that they're writing? What supports can we give them so that they can be successful? Collaborate with one another, collaborate with the student, ask them what they need. Some students can just tell you, I don't know what I need, or I can't write a 3-paragraph essay. That is functional communication. That gives you information that you can use to help that child so that they cannot be unsuccessful. We want them to be successful. Having clear rules and expectations, and I talked about that in week 1, I think in the elementary. This is a game changer, guys. The kids know what your rules and expectations are, what they get if they follow the rule, and what they get if they don't follow that rule, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more later in this presentation. Being consistent, being loving, being kind, and having consequences. And yes, you can do those things simultaneously, and I'm going to show you how. All right, we're going to go on to objective 2. We're going to learn antecedent or preventive measures to support students being on task and engaged in their learning. So we did talk about a few things in week 1. I want you to build on what you've learned. I want you to build on the skills that you're already stepping forward a little bit at a time, and add some of these things in if you think, gosh, I could be doing better in this area. None of this is rocket science, but all of it is science. And sometimes it seems so simple, but we may not be implementing these strategies according to their science, or we may not be doing them at all. And so take little baby steps in what you're doing and thinking about where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and what we can do to move forward to just get a little bit better at some of those things that we may not be feeling like we're proficient in. So building relationships. So I want to read you a quote from John Hattie. He said, after years of extensive research on student learning, he found that the relationships teachers share with their students have a greater effect on their academic growth than socioeconomic status, professional development, class size, or any type of special programs. It's not that those other things were not important, but that the teacher-student relationship had more impact on learning outcomes. Your relationship with all of your students is more important than some of those other things. It is vital that you figure out how to have a good relationship with your kids, all of them, even the hard ones, even the bad ones, right? Even the ones that grunt at you and roll their eyeballs. They still want some kind of acknowledgement that they're there. There are many mandates that are beyond our control in education. That means things we can't change, right? Those things that are mandated. But teachers can be change agents. And I love that term, change agents, when we develop relationships that truly count. It doesn't take a lot of time. It does take some thought. It does take sometimes some humility or some maybe different way of approaching a student that maybe not as easy to get along with or easy to have a relationship with as some of our other students. But the teacher-student relationship has an effect size of 0.72. And if you're familiar with any of John Hattie's work, the hinge point in those interventions that they have done, the hinge point is a 0.4. And a 0.4 means there's about 1 year of academic growth within one school year. A 0.72 is almost twice that. So you could say that there could be almost 2 years of growth in one academic school year for kids that have a good, strong relationship with their teacher. It is significant. And there is a book called Significant 72, and there's more that comes after that. I did put the link in this presentation at the end. It is a great book, and it gives really super awesome ideas of how to make sure that every child in your school feels known and feels heard and feels loved and accepted and appreciated in your building. It's a great book, and I would suggest if you have time and $30 that you buy that book and check it out. But it talks about how the Chicago City School District really spent the first 72 hours of the school year promoting connection. They didn't test their kids. They didn't do placement tests and curriculum-based assessments. They focused on creating relationships between teachers and students, and students and students. That prevents so many things when we have environments that are loving and caring and supportive of all kids, and that all kids feel that they have a connection with their peers and their teachers. In addition, they have 72 minutes a week, or the 72 is tied to everything, but basically saying, checking in with your students after you have a long break or a long weekend, that you spend 72 seconds reviewing the rules and expectations, right? And all the great things that we can have access to in the classroom. Really a great book, and a lot of really good stories in there that some are a little emotional. So honor the child's genuine need to feel known, significant, and important. I think we've talked about that. Recognize and appreciate their strengths. I have talked to so many teachers where I say, I'm a behavior specialist, right? So I do behavior intervention plans and help with those kids that are maybe struggle a little bit with appropriate behavior. And I'll ask the teachers, well, what are they good at? And sometimes the teachers really struggle, right? And I say, do they ever hold the door for another student? Do they ever say good morning? Do they ever hug their mom goodbye? I mean, what are they good at? What can they do? What can we build on? And let's start there. So really think about what strengths your students have and appreciate them for those things. Reinforce and praise appropriate behavior. All the good things we see our kids doing, we want to tell them thank you for. I appreciate you being on time. I appreciate you bringing your math homework. I know you had the basketball championship game last night. That is showing appreciation for what they're doing, and that increases those good behaviors. As a teacher, sometimes I tended to focus on the problem behaviors because it was a problem for me, which would remind me that I needed to take care of this problem, instead of, hey, there's no problem. I'm offering praise and appreciation and all the good things to all the kids right now to keep that good behavior going. So we want to shift our focus to focusing on the positive things and reinforcing those instead of the negative things or the behaviors that we don't like. And then just using I statements. It makes me feel, mad when you're late. It's just a form of manipulation, and we don't want to handle behavior like that. Not saying that you can't tell a student how you feel or things like that, but just put that back on the student, and we'll talk a little bit more how to do that. I've kind of modeled some comments of appreciation. Our kids that are in high school, they enjoy being told that they're appreciated. And, it's really easy when I walk into an elementary school to see the teachers saying, I love the way you're sitting so tall in your seat. Thank you for putting your name on your paper. There's so much of that praise. And then when we get into high school, this is the response I get from teachers. Well, this is their responsibility. They should be on time because they're almost an adult. Well, that may be true. So what are we doing to help them to be on time? And what kind of appreciation are we giving them if they are on time? Or are we only focusing on the days that they're late, right? Because then we're hitting the wrong side of the problem. We want to focus on the good things. So when that kid is on time, or maybe closer to being on time, maybe he's not 20 minutes late, he's only 10. Maybe we say, hey, man, you almost made it on time. I'm glad you're here. That is scientifically proven to increase good behavior. If you say, man, you're late again, try again tomorrow, that is scientifically proven to cause worse behavior. Be sincere and be specific as to what kind of comments or appreciation you're giving to the kids. And then just use your communication skills. Talk about your thoughts and feelings. I worked with a middle school teacher, and she had a student that was acting out in class, and he was kind of that class clown. And she was really frustrated because she couldn't get through the lesson, and then she would end up reprimanding him. And so we were talking after school one day, and I didn't work directly with the student. It was just the teacher and I talking in the hallway. And she was saying, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, have you ever told him that you were trying to get through the lesson and that, you were feeling frustrated by him making comments? And she's like, no, I haven't. And that's not saying tell him in the middle of the whole class when you're feeling frustrated. That's saying pull him aside at a good time and talk to him about, you know, I love your comments in class, but I have got to get through the lesson. And it's frustrating to me when I can't get through the lesson. And so what can we do? And when she pulled me aside a couple weeks later, and she told me that she talked to this kid, and the kid was like, I thought you wanted me to say these things because they're funny and you're up at the board laughing. And she said, that was true. I laugh at the things he says because he's hilarious. He didn't realize that she was feeling frustrated about not being able to get through her lesson. And so they came to an agreement that after she got through the lesson, then he could say some funny things, and then she would give him a signal. If it was like, okay, we're done now, she would give him a signal that, okay, we're done now. And then he would be able to stop engaging in that behavior. So sometimes just pulling a kid out and talking to them, and that also helps build that relationship and rapport if it's done lovingly and appropriately. By praising the right behavior, we increase the chance that that behavior is going to occur more often. Praise increases on-task behavior and lesson engagement. Kids will be on task and engaging in, if they can, going back to that academic piece and a lot of other pieces as well. If you're giving them praise and they like that and they can do what you're asking them to do, they will. And if you believe in any of Ross Greene's work, he wrote a book called Lost and Found at School. It really talks about the way we talk to our kids, and it talks about the fact that when kids can do what we're asking them to do, they do. And I've seen that 100% of the time. When we give them academic tasks and other ways to be successful, whether it's accommodating them in some way or differentiating for them in some way, when we take that work to a level that they can be successful, they are successful. The next bullet point is when a teacher reprimands, it increases student misbehavior. Guys, it does. It's science. Kids have worse behavior when we threaten them or reprimand them. It just creates a cycle. It's called the punishment cycle. I think I put a slide on here. And then reprimands decrease their compliance. Just as you as an adult probably would not want to be reprimanded in front of your peers or colleagues, or not in front of them. A reprimand kind of hurts. And some people think, well, then I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not even going to try. And so think about how you feel as an adult. And like I said at the beginning of this presentation, thinking about maybe how you engage with students and thinking about being on the other end of that as the student, and what would you think about you? And if you think, well, I might not really like me, but the kid does this. No, take that last part out. No buts. You might not really like yourself. And so what can you do differently to be more supportive for kids and their behavior? Here's that cycle of punishment. If you see on the right top, it says the student misbehaves, the teacher punishes, the student reacts negatively, sometimes even retaliatory. I don't know if you guys saw in the news where a teacher took a Nintendo Switch away from a student and he assaulted her. And I'm not saying that she shouldn't have done those things. I'm just saying that we have to be careful how we're treating our kids and make sure that we are engaging in the things that are scientifically valid to work. And I tell teachers, don't ever manhandle something away from a student because you're taking away their free agency, right? I wouldn't want somebody to come in and shut my laptop and say, you're done working. It's 3 o'clock. I would probably have some feelings about that. Just as you would want to be treated, we try to treat our students with that same kind of respect. When the teacher reacts negatively, what happens? The teacher punishes again, and then the student continues to misbehave. So as you guys can see, there's that vicious cycle. And I think we're probably all guilty of engaging in some of those behaviors, thinking that it will get better, and it doesn't, it gets worse. And so really working on the front side of things to reinforce good behavior, praise good behavior, support students with whatever accommodations or whatever they need to be successful, to not allow that bad behavior to even creep in. So for prevention methods, you want to focus on the positive. You're gonna, instead of saying follow directions over and over and over again, or I see this in behavior plans, represent the demand. Well, guess what? If the child isn't engaging in the demand, then why would you keep representing it? Why don't you dig deeper and find out why they're not following directions or why they're not engaging in that task demand, and figuring out how to address the root of the problem instead of force compliance or try to force compliance, right? Don't engage in the power struggle. As soon as you let go of that rope, the kid doesn't have anything to pull against, right? And so thinking about just holding on to that rope, yes, it is your classroom. Yes, they should be respectful. If they're not respectful or they're not doing what you're asking them to do, employ some of these other strategies that we'll talk about today, and they work, and it's awesome. And you'll see different behavior, sometimes overnight. Show empathy and support. If a kid's not doing something and you're just saying, I told you to get your math book out, well, it's going to be homework now, go over and help them get their math book out. I witnessed a situation this week where a teacher was asking the students to get out their workbook, and one student had his head down on his desk and he was kind of moaning, and the teacher prompted him about 3 times in 2 minutes, and he continued to lay there, and she went over and she said, let me help you. And she took the book out and she opened it to the right page, and he picked up his pencil and she said, oh my gosh, thank you for getting started on your work. And she gave him 2 smiley faces, right? And they were just with her dry erase marker. But that right there changed his behavior for the next 20 minutes. He was on task, he was working, he was compliant. She continued to praise and praise. It turned his behavior around just like that. Well, guess what? He didn't do anything. She went to his desk, she pulled out his workbook, she opened to the correct page, and then he picked up his pencil, right? And so you could say, well, he didn't do it anyway, I'm not going to give him a smiley face. But you see what she did there? She gave him the smiley faces, she gave him 2, and then that's reinforcing him. He started working. He did 2 full pages of math workbook. It works when we employ it the right way and when we have reasonable expectations of our kids. Be consistent, start fresh each day. Don't let yourself hold a chip on your shoulder for behavior that kids engage in. They're children, and they have enough pressure besides us carrying around our feelings and thoughts about them. So allow them to start fresh every day. And guess what? If yesterday was a bad day, then what do we need to do when they come back to school tomorrow to change that day, to make it a good day? And so where can you step in and make changes or tweaks to what you're asking them to do, or how you're asking them to do it, or in that relationship, so that they want to engage in the correct behavior? And then meet kids where they're at, provide supports. If they're not producing the level of work that other kids are in the classroom, then maybe we need to take it back a little bit or give them other supports, regardless of whether or not they're on an IEP or receive special education services. There's other things that we can do that are in the parameters of general education, to provide those supports for our kids. And then think about teaching skills. So instead of punishing misbehavior or bad behavior, teach about what do they need to learn, and have some discussions and some teaching on those skills so that they have the means to handle some of those things that they deal with throughout the day. All right, we're going to talk about how to collaborate with a student. And this is really important because a lot of times our kids don't know there's a problem, or we are butting heads with them, trying to get them to be compliant or complete work or remain on task. And sometimes if we just talk to them we can get some additional information that may help us help them. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define the problem. And the problem should not be Eric is never on task. The problem should be, when is he not on task? All day, every day? It may be. And then we can look at other things. Are they sleeping correctly, right? All of the things that we would look at. So really explicitly define the problem. Maybe Eric's only off task when he gets a worksheet. I had a student, oh gosh, probably 7 years ago, that would not complete any independent work. And when I started working with him, he couldn't see the worksheet. We had him go to the doctor and get a vision test, and he needed glasses. He could not see the worksheet, but he didn't have the communication or the knowledge or understanding to know that he couldn't see it. He just thought that that's what it looked like, and he was supposed to figure out what to do, and he couldn't even see it. So really looking at how to support your kids. So I say listen to Einstein, because this is what Einstein said. If I have 1 hour to solve a problem, 1 hour, 60 minutes to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes to solve it. Me, as an educator, as a mom, as a person, I'm a solver. Man, when I was a principal, I used to say to my husband, I feel like I'm skeet shooting at work, right? These clay pigeons would come and I'd shoot them all out of the sky because I was solving problems like a boss. I felt like I was really being successful. When I stopped trying to solve problems so quickly, other people had the opportunity to learn how to help themselves, right? You really need to spend time on the front end of things and find out why the child is having problems, what they're experiencing, what those problems really are. And the problem is not defiance, and the problem is not non-compliance. The problem is something deeper. So dig a little bit deeper and find out where that problem is, so that then when you have a really good, clear understanding of that problem, then you can spend 5 minutes to solve it. And it really is that simple. It won't take you an hour though. You probably already know. Discuss concerns with the student privately, express how you feel, be calm and professional, right? So going back to that instance that I told you about, the middle school teacher who went to her student. I love when you tell jokes in class and you're so funny, and it was not only funny, it was appropriate. So this kid really had some skills, but she didn't ever tell him how she felt or what she needed from him. She was telling him to be quiet and all of those things instead of having that conversation, and that conversation changed his behavior. And that happens a lot. Allow the student to, talk and give what they're thinking and feeling. Like this student, he said, I thought you thought I was being funny. You're laughing up there. I had no idea that you wanted me to be quiet so you could finish your lesson, right? So allow them to say how they're feeling or what they're thinking. Don't ask why, because 100% of the time you ask why, what words are you going to hear? I don't know, right? That's what you're going to hear. So ask how we can work together. How can I support you? What can I do to help you? You are a teacher. You are a helper. You are teaching kids how to handle life and learn how to handle life, even if you are a science teacher. You want to help kids to be able to do the things that they need to do to be successful, not only in science, but in their life. Problem solve. So both parties are satisfied and they agree on the outcome. So back to that middle school teacher, she said, I need to get through my lesson. I need to get through instruction without all your great jokes. And he said, okay. And she said, after that, you can joke around a little bit, but when I give you this sign, that means we got to wrap it up. Okay, done. Right? Did it work perfectly? No. Did it work a heck of a lot better than it did before then? Yes. It did, because they both came to some resolutions where he could be funny and be the class clown, but she could also teach her lesson. Feel the need of the student to feel significant and successful. That you can see that in that prior example. And then if you need to, communicate the plans with parents, right? And sometimes we have more frequent or high magnitude disruptive behaviors that may be a little bit more serious. We're not talking about those today. We're talking about basically defiance and non-compliance, pretty low magnitude level behaviors. But sometimes if you can communicate the plan, and not only the plan, but have some kind of a check-in, between home and school, that's really an effective strategy to help our students engage in good behaviors. If the student starts to escalate, you're going to intervene early with a reminder or redirection. You're going to call attention to your relationship. Hey man, I really like you. I was hoping that you would do this for me, or we could do this together, right? Have a neutral body, relaxed stance, calm tone of voice, choose your battles. Sometimes you can just say, hey man, why don't you go take a break or take a walk, right? You don't always have to address it and fix it in the moment. And then the best way to avoid escalation is give them what they need. If they say, I can't write 3 paragraphs, what can you write? Well, I can write 1 sentence. Great, let's start there, right? How can I help you get started, right? Build on what they can do, give them what they need or what they want, and build on that. Give limited choices. Don't talk too much. I'm very, very guilty of this. Don't negotiate, argue, or threaten, and allow natural consequences as much as possible. All right, we're going to go through this really quickly. It's precision commands. It is really effective as a tool for about 75 or 80% of our kids. I'm going to give you the exact steps on how to use it, but I'm going to cover this really quickly because you can read the slides later, and I want to get to a couple other things. Make eye contact and be in close proximity. Not hovering over a child with your arms folded, but go to them using your relationship and the compassion that you have for this child. Make eye contact, be in close proximity in a supportive, loving, non-threatening stance. Use a non-emotional, neutral tone, be kind. Precision commands work, I think, for a couple of reasons. One is because the kids know exactly how many times you're going to nag them, right? And the other is because they know what they're earning. So it's not the words you say, it's the consequences you say them, that you have tied to them in advance. And it's also just being kind and human, and helping them to not have the opportunity to be unsuccessful, right? Make it brief, don't use sarcasm, don't question. I have teachers that say, do you want to come over here and sit with me to do your reading? And kids are like, nope. Well, we don't use that, right? Don't use a question unless you're going to take, if they say no, right? If they say no and we force them to do that anyway, can you see what we're teaching? Give them ample time to comply. Sometimes it takes longer than others, especially if we're already in kind of that defiant mode. And then reinforce if the student complies. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Step 1, Joan, please sit down and take out your pencil. Don't threaten. This would be an example of threaten. Joan, if you don't sit in your seat, I'm going to have to call your mother and let her know you're not following directions. Man, I'll tell you what, don't ever call your parents for that. We have so many other things to deal with as a parent. Those are things that are pretty low level behaviors that we should be able to handle in our school at least, but more importantly, as a teacher in your class, if you have the tools to do so. Don't question. Joan, would you please get out your pencil? No, thank you. Don't be vague. Joan, please follow directions. Well, what does that mean? When I ask kids, what are you supposed to be doing? I get, I don't know, almost 100% of the time. Joan, I need you to sit in your seat and take out your pencil. Step 1, if the student complies, you deliver reinforcement. Joan, thank you for sitting in your seat and getting out your pencil. Thank you for being ready to work. Just because your kids are in middle school or high school doesn't mean that you cannot do that step. That step right there will determine whether this kid listens to you in the future. If the student doesn't comply, move to step 2, and you're going to add signal words need and now to your request. That doesn't mean that you need to say them in a nasty way. You can still say, Joan, I need you to please sit down at your desk and take your pencil out now, right? So the words are not what's important necessarily. Tone of voice, relationship, all those other things are just as important. Then give appropriate wait time, use empathy and distraction as tools, right? Add accommodations for success, like this teacher did yesterday. Let me help you grab your math book out and open this to the correct page for you, right? And that immediately turned around his behavior and he picked up his pencil. But even there, the teacher could have stopped and not done anything. But she said, thank you for getting ready to work. I'm going to give you 2 smileys. And yes, this was elementary school, but the same idea works in middle and high school. Maybe you're not giving smileys in the classroom that you're in, but giving appreciation and thanks go a long way. So here's an alternative to step 2. Joan, I need you to get started on your assignment, or we'll have to take it home for homework. How can I help you get started? Joan may lay there with her head on her desk. You don't need to keep talking to her and nagging her. How much time depends on A, where that child is in the crisis cycle. If they're about to blow, I would let it go. If they're in an early stage of that crisis cycle and you can help them, then I would step in and offer support and help, not just a redirect statement. If the student begins working, provide praise or other reinforcement. So here is this in a nutshell for you if you want to look at this. Sometimes as a teacher, I would put things on my board so that I could refer to them throughout the day to help me learn how to engage in the new behaviors that I was learning. If they do not engage in step 2, when you add the need and now, then you're going to say, Joan, because you didn't sit in your seat and get out your pencil, you need to stay in from recess for 2 minutes so that I can help you. Not you need to stay in from recess for 2 minutes with your head down, because what is that teaching? Right? The natural consequence would be you didn't do the work that everybody else did. And so when everybody else is at recess, I'm going to take that first 2 minutes to sit with you and help you get started on this assignment. It's not a punishment, it's a planned consequence. There's a diagram for you if you like those things. So we want to use natural consequences if we can. We don't want them to be terrible consequences. Don't take away free time. Take away a couple minutes of free time. Make sure the students know in advance when you have a rule and an expectation, this is what you get if you follow that expectation. This is what you get if you don't. It's not a threat, it's a consequence one way or the other. Now we're going to talk about how to implement consequences. If you follow the rules, you get all of these great things, right? When I work with teachers on instructional cycles that they, do in their classrooms, I always say when we get to the I do, I mean the you do, when we have that independent part of our lesson plan, we want to make sure that there's something at the end of class that it could be reinforcing for them that would make them want to finish their independent work, right? And so they might have recess, or you might have free time, or you might say, hey, when you're done with this assignment, you can go work on your partner science project that you're doing in the back of the room. So have something that fits right into your schedule that's a natural reinforcer. You don't have to change anything. You just have your classroom set up in cycles that support reinforcing doing the hard stuff, which is usually the independent work, right? So they have all this time and all this access to the good stuff. If you don't do that, you might miss something, right? And so if you're a science teacher in 9th grade and the student slept through your class and you did all of the things that you needed to do to help that student and provide support for that student, maybe they missed the first 5 minutes of the assembly. Those things need to be collaborated and communicated, but there should be some kind of a consequence besides the F on the assignment, because kids don't care about that sometimes. During that time that they are with you, you're going to teach. Benefits of pre-planned consequences. It reduces your nagging, because when we're nagging, they're not listening. Reduces power struggles, creates a predictable environment. That's really important for a lot of our kids. Just, hey, what's coming next? Oh, I know that if I do this, I get this. I know if I don't, I get this. It really allows them to make a choice, right? If you were choosing between the red pill and the blue pill, go Matrix, right? But you didn't know which one, either one of them was going to get you. You wouldn't know which one to choose. You wouldn't know what those consequences were. How would you know which pill you wanted to take? You need to make sure that the consequences are pre-planned and those kids know. Enrich your relationships, provide choice. When we have consequences in place like that, the teacher functions as a reinforcer because they're helping the kid do what they need to do during that first 2 minutes of recess, rather than being the punisher. Meaning, oh, sorry, you're going to have to miss 2 minutes of recess. You say, darn it, we didn't get started on our assignment. What happens now? I missed 2 minutes of recess. Let me get the kids in line and out the door, and then I'll come and help you. So you've just turned that whole situation around. It's the same situation, but you've turned it around to be the helper and the supporter rather than the punisher. And that's important in any relationship. Use a hierarchy of small steps, right? The smaller the infraction, the smaller the consequence. Make it logical. It should be inconvenient, but not devastating. Make sure it's in their natural environment, and don't take away something the student has already earned. There are some troubleshooting ideas in here. I'm not going to go through these because I want to get to one more thing before we're done. But make sure in this one, it's giving warnings and threats. You don't have to threaten if the kid knows they get two prompts, supportive, loving, redirecting prompts, but then there's a consequence that the child or the person is already going to know what's coming. So instead of threatening, we support. Teacher talking too much, don't talk, just offer support. Go and help them get their book out, help them write that first sentence, scribe that first sentence for them, whatever support they need, instead of continuing to talk and nag. I want to talk a little bit about reinforcement. Let's see. This is all going to be coming to you in the PowerPoint presentation. I try to put a lot on the slide so that you guys can read them and know how to implement these things. So plan a variety of tools in order to support you in supporting them. So there's one additional intervention I wanted to talk about, and that was the behavior and point tracker. We did learn 2 different group contingencies in week one on Tuesday and one on Thursday. Those are recorded, so you can go back and listen to those and see if you can get some ideas there if you missed that week. But we're going to talk about behavior trackers. I see a lot of behavior trackers, even for general education students. And most of the time they have negative things on there, right? They have even frowny faces. I saw in a middle school a couple weeks ago, and I thought, oh, are we still carrying around a frowny face? Like, I don't care how old you are. No one wants to carry around a frowny face. If you walked into work and you were late because of the snowstorm and your boss handed you a badge of a frowny face that you had to carry around all day, I mean, come on. Let's think about better tools. So we need the criteria, what we need kids to do. It should have the expected behaviors, 2 or 3, no more. Words and pictures, simple, physical paper with those things on it. The number of boxes or tallies or whatever they need to do to earn. And then the frequency, how often do we give that student reinforcement? We give it as often as we need to get and keep good behavior going. It will fade out gradually and usually pretty naturally. The reinforcement is the important part. If we're not giving the kids something that they need, they're not going to do it. If you were not getting paid to go to work tomorrow, you probably would not go. You might go for a little while because there might be other things that are reinforcing to you there, like relationships and friendships, and maybe it feels good to be a good teacher, but you wouldn't go back for long because you need the money, you want the money, and you're not getting it. It doesn't have to be an extrinsic thing. So we want to provide rewards or reinforcers after a good behavior to increase that behavior happening over and over again. It's the opposite of punishment. We're giving good things, more good things for better behavior, and things are not always things. So think about it. Your relationship with a student, providing praise. Did you ever have that teacher that you just loved and they were so grateful for you and so you were so helpful in their classroom? It's because that relationship reinforced you and reinforced those good behaviors that you engaged in. So a thing does not always mean something. Some of our kids do need things at the beginning, but generally most people, most kids, even elementary school kids, want friendships, want relationships, want to feel successful at school, and you can help them for those things to be reinforcing. The best way to sustain motivation is to support internal drivers, all of the things we talked about here, how you feel when you have friends, get a good grade, get praise from your teacher, with the right kind of external feedback. So we can pair those things so that we're providing whatever combination that child needs to feel successful and engage in better behaviors. All right. We did a lot today. I know that these are fast. I always think like, I can't not talk about this or that. So I know I talk a lot, and I hope that this enhances your practice as a teacher. What I want you to do is, we talked about all of those things. Just take 1 or 2 steps. If you're not implementing precision commands or you don't have a good relationship with a student, think about something small that you can do tomorrow to enhance something in your practice to make you a better teacher and to make our kids more successful in their day and more successful in their learning. So just take a minute and think about a couple things before you go. I hope that you will do that. Or I'm just sitting here talking to a screen that I can't even see any of you on. But I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you taking your time on a Thursday. I know you guys are tired, and hopefully you've learned something that you can take back and enhance your classrooms and be a better teacher. Here's those resources. You will get these slides, and so hopefully you can use some of these things. And as always, thank you for being here today, and I will see you in a couple weeks.
Christine, thank you so very much. This, again, we have been well fed. And so Christine has agreed to open it up now for some live questions if you'd like. I saw just a couple, so if on just one on the board at this point, but it looks, I don't know if you'd like to go ahead and unmute and ask Christine yourself. I would be happy to unmute you. Or I will take another look really quick to see if I see. Looks like some comments in there for Christine to go back later and take a look at.
I do,
So
and I do that. I do look at everything you guys say. So if you have a suggestion or comment, I welcome those and I appreciate those.
Christine, I do see one. It says, do you use something specific to figure out what is motivating for a student when earning reinforcement enforcers? I have used a reinforcement survey, for example. So they're wondering if you use something to see like what is.
Yes, I mean, we certainly can. I have reinforcer surveys where the student tells you what they like. I love that your teachers are doing that. That's awesome. A lot of times you can just ask a student, right? I was in a middle school student. This was a couple months ago, and I said, well, what do you want? And he said, I want to use the red pen. And I'm like, well, here, you have mine, right? Sometimes it can be pretty simple. Also, just knowing what their interests are. I've even gone so far as to, a student might like a Pokemon character, and you can print out a Pokemon picture for them to color or something. And I know that sounds so simple, but our middle school and high school kids love stuff like that. They're still children, they're just not little children, right? And so something that is really simple and easy that doesn't cost you money. Sometimes it could be something like lunch in the classroom with the teacher and a friend, or coming in to play a game, or staying in from recess and doing something with a peer. There are so many things that are really simple, and you think about, giving them a little toy from your class store. That's awesome, but then that toy doesn't even make it home. It ends up broken and in the gutter somewhere. But if you are allowing that student to come in and play a game with a peer, think about all the skills that they're building, earning something like that, if that were valuable to them. My email is on there if you need some ideas for reinforcers or reinforcer assessments or I've got pages full. It might tick you off when I email them back to you, but it can give you a good idea of some resources and some ideas. So email me and I'm glad to share. But great job having an assessment where you ask kids. I think that's amazing. So whoever asked that question is awesome.
All right. Well, Christine, I know that you are busy actually in Wyoming right now, and she's supporting a district here in Wyoming. So thank you for that as well. I definitely want to give you the rest of your evening so that you can get prepared for all the other things you have going. So, but thank you so very much. And I appreciate, again, we appreciate all of you being here. We know that it does take time away from your planning or your family time. So we do appreciate you being here and learning along with us. Of course, we will see you in a couple of weeks on Thursday. And if you were supposed to make the last Tuesday session for elementary, I know some of you are doing both sessions. We did need to reschedule that due to some technical difficulties, and that will be held on the 30th, on this coming Tuesday. Same time, 4 to 5 o'clock p.m. So we hope to see you there, and everyone have a great night.